It was just another normal day for Daniel, the kind of day that starts with coffee, traffic, and a long to-do list. He had an important meeting at work and was already running late. His wife had dropped him off near the office so he could grab some coffee for the team before the big presentation. It wasn't anything out of the ordinary, just a quick stop, in and out. The street was busy, but he found a spot right in front of the cafe. Technically, it wasn't legal parking. There were signs all over saying no stopping, no parking. But he figured 5 minutes wouldn't hurt. He locked the car and walked inside, greeted by the smell of roasted beans and the hum of early morning chatter. He ordered 6 cups, black, 1 with cream, 2 with sugar, and 1 that his boss liked with oat milk and cinnamon. While he waited, he checked his phone, saw a reminder from his daughter's school about parent-teacher night, and smiled. Life was full, messy, and moving fast, but good. 5 minutes later, coffee in hand, he stepped back outside. His car was still there, untouched, and he felt a wave of relief. But as he got closer, he noticed someone standing next to it. A man in uniform. A police officer. Daniel slowed his pace. He didn't do anything wrong, not really. Sure, he parked illegally, but that was just a ticket, right? Maybe even a warning. He approached calmly, holding the tray of coffee like a shield. "Morning," he said politely. The officer looked up, nodded slowly. "License and registration." Daniel opened the door, carefully placed the coffee on the passenger seat, and reached into the glove compartment. He handed over the documents without hesitation. The officer flipped through them, then looked back at the car. "You know this is a no parking zone?" "Yeah, I know. I was only going to be a minute. I just needed coffee for my team." The officer gave a slow nod. Then he closed the folder with Daniel's papers and leaned against the car. "You know," he said, voice low, casual, "there's a way we can handle this without writing anything up." Daniel blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean," the officer said, lowering his voice more, "if you're willing to help me out, maybe we don't have to go through all the paperwork." Daniel's stomach dropped a little. He wasn't sure what the officer meant at first. Was this some kind of joke? "I'm sorry." "Help you out how?" he asked, trying to stay calm. The officer glanced around like they were sharing a secret. $5,000 cash and I walk away. No ticket, no record. You save time, I save time. Daniel couldn't believe what he was hearing. This wasn't a movie, this was real life. He was standing in the middle of the city, holding coffee for his coworkers, being asked to pay thousands of dollars in cash to avoid a simple parking ticket. That's a lot of money," he stammered. The officer shrugged. "Parking here costs $250, but this way nobody gets hurt." Daniel tried to laugh it off. "Come on, man, that's serious money. I don't carry that kind of cash on me." The officer didn't smile. "You can get it, I'll wait." Daniel's heart started beating faster. He realized this wasn't a joke. The officer was serious. And now he was stuck. Say no and risk getting a ticket, or worse, some kind of trouble? Or try to play along and figure out a way to expose what was happening? He thought fast. He couldn't just walk away. He had to stay calm, keep the conversation going, and buy himself time to think. "Look," he said, trying to sound reasonable. "I need to make a call. Let me see if I can pull something together." The officer crossed his arms. "Make it quick." Daniel stepped a few feet away, pretending to dial his phone. He didn't actually press send. He just held it to his ear and acted like he was talking to someone. Meanwhile, his brain raced. Should he report this? How? Who could he trust? If he called someone right here, would the officer get angry? Would things escalate? He ended the fake call and turned back. "I might be able to get it," he said, trying to sound nervous. "But not right now. Can we meet again later?" The officer studied him for a second, then gave a small nod. "All right, meet me tomorrow, same time, same place, come alone." Daniel nodded, feeling sick to his stomach. He got into his car, made sure to take the coffee with him, and drove off. His hands were shaking on the steering wheel. Once he was a few blocks away, he pulled over, took a deep breath. Then he pulled out his phone and called someone he trusted, a friend who worked in legal aid. As soon as the call connected, Daniel said, "You're not going to believe what just happened." His friend listened quietly. When Daniel finished, there was a pause. Then came the response. "We need to record this. We need to stop this guy." Daniel nodded even though his friend couldn't see him. "Okay, I'm in." And just like that, what started as a regular morning became the beginning of something bigger, something dangerous but necessary, because silence helps corruption grow. And Daniel was done staying quiet. Daniel couldn't stop thinking about what had just happened. He kept replaying the moment over and over in his head like a movie he didn't want to watch again. One minute he was grabbing coffee, the next he was being asked to pay thousands of dollars to avoid a ticket. It didn't make sense, it wasn't fair, and it definitely wasn't right. He sat in his car for a few minutes after pulling over, trying to calm down. His hands were still shaking. He took a deep breath, then another, and tried to focus. He had called his friend, someone he trusted completely, and now he was waiting to hear back. But while he waited, his mind was racing. What if he had just paid the money? What if he had given the officer the cash and walked away? Sure, he would have been out $5,000, but maybe that would have been easier. No drama, no stress, just move on with life. But deep down, he knew that wouldn't be right either. Giving in would mean letting someone get away with something wrong. It would mean helping corruption grow. And worse, it might encourage the officer to do the same thing to someone else tomorrow. No, Daniel couldn't do that. He had to do something. But what? His phone buzzed. It was his friend calling back. "Hey," Daniel said, trying to sound normal. "I've been thinking," his friend said. "If you're serious about doing something about this guy, we need proof." "I know," Daniel replied. "I just don't know how to get it without getting myself into more trouble." "There's a way," his friend said. "We can set something up, a sting." Daniel blinked. "You mean like record him?" "Exactly. We can get audio, video, if possible. If he takes the money on camera, that's solid evidence." Daniel swallowed hard. "That sounds risky." "It is," his friend admitted. "But if we do it smart, we can keep you safe and get the truth out." They talked for almost an hour. They went over every detail. How to contact the officer again. How to act nervous enough to seem real. How to hide a recorder in his pocket or in the coffee bag. The plan wasn't perfect, but it was the best one they had. Daniel agreed. The next day he sent a text to the officer. "Hey, I got the money. Can we meet today?" It felt strange typing those words, like he was walking into a trap. But this time, he was setting it. A few minutes later, the reply came. Same spot, 1 hour. Daniel met his friend at a small cafe nearby. They checked the recording equipment, a tiny voice recorder hidden inside a keychain. It worked. They tested it twice. Then his friend gave him a long look. "You sure you want to do this?" he asked. Daniel nodded. "Yeah, I'm sure." They drove together but parked a few blocks away. Daniel walked alone to the meeting point, heart pounding the whole way. When he got there, the officer was already waiting. "Glad you came," the officer said, smiling like nothing was wrong. Daniel handed him a plain envelope. 5,000, he said, keeping his voice steady. The officer took it without looking inside. He slipped it into his jacket pocket like it was nothing. "Good choice," he said. "Smart man." Then he turned and started walking away. Daniel stood there for a second, not moving. That was it? He had expected more. Maybe a thank you, or even a warning. But the officer just walked off like he had done this before, and maybe he had. Daniel pulled out his phone and sent a quick message. Done. Within minutes, his friend arrived. They watched from a distance as the officer got into his patrol car and drove off. "We got it all," his friend said. "Audio's clean. You can clearly hear him ask for the money." Daniel let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. So now what? Now we go to the people who can do something about it. Later that day, they delivered the evidence to the Internal Affairs Department. They stayed anonymous at first, just to be safe. But when the officers reviewed the tape. Their faces changed. They knew this was serious. Within hours, the officer was suspended. Daniel didn't feel like a hero. He didn't want praise or attention. He just wanted things to be fair. And for a moment, he thought maybe they could be. But the story wasn't over yet. The next morning, the news broke. Local officer suspended after bribery allegations. There was no mention of Daniel's name, which was exactly what he wanted. But seeing the headline made it real. It really happened. And now people were talking. Some people praised him, even if they didn't know who he was. Others wondered why he didn't just pay the money and walk away. But Daniel knew the answer to that, because silence helps bad things grow, and he wasn't going to stay silent anymore. The days that followed felt like a storm had passed, but the ground was still shaking. Daniel tried to return to his normal life. He went back to work, dropped his kids off at school, made coffee in the mornings like always. But everything felt different now, like he was walking on glass waiting for it to crack. He kept checking his phone constantly, half expecting a call from someone angry or powerful, but nothing came. At least, not right away. Then the news started spreading. At first, it was just local coverage, a small article online, then a mention on the evening news. The headline stayed the same across every station. Officer suspended after bribery investigation. No names were mentioned publicly yet. Daniel's identity remained protected. But even so, people were talking. Some said the officer had it coming. Others said maybe he was just caught in a setup, but the story didn't stop there. Within a week, Internal Affairs reopened a few old cases. They found more reports, complaints from other drivers who said similar things had happened. Nothing ever got proven before. Now, with this new case as evidence, they had something real to work with. Daniel watched all of it unfold from the sidelines. He never spoke to the press. He never posted anything online, but he knew he had done the right thing. Still, not everyone saw it that way. One morning, when he walked into the office, he noticed a few coworkers whispering. One of them gave him a look. Not anger, not exactly, more like confusion. Like they weren't sure what to make of him anymore. Later that day, his boss asked to see him in private. They sat down in the meeting room. The door was closed. "Heard about what happened?" his boss said carefully. Daniel nodded. "Yeah, I guess word got out." His boss leaned forward. "Listen, I'm not judging you. What that officer did was wrong, but some people here are asking why you didn't just move on with your life." Daniel looked at him surprised. Because what he was doing was wrong. If I stayed quiet, he would have kept doing it. His boss sighed. "I get that, I do. But sometimes doing the right thing can cost you more than you expect." That stuck with Daniel long after the meeting ended. That night he talked to his wife about it. "I just don't understand," she said, sipping tea. "Why would anyone be mad at you? You did the right thing." "Some people think doing the right thing should be easy," Daniel replied. "Like it shouldn't cause problems for anyone else. But the truth is, it usually does." She nodded slowly. "So what now?" "I don't know," he admitted. "I guess we wait." And wait they did. A few weeks later, the officer was officially charged, not just suspended, charged with bribery, misconduct, and abuse of public trust. The story hit bigger headlines now, national ones. Everywhere Daniel went, he could feel eyes on him. Even if people didn't know it was him who reported the officer, they were looking for someone like him, a person who stood up, who said no. It wasn't long before a reporter reached out to his friend, the one who helped set up the sting. They asked questions, tried to find out who the real witness was. Daniel and his friend agreed, better to come forward than to let rumors grow. So Daniel did something he never thought he'd do. He gave an interview. Not live. Not on camera. Just a recorded statement, voice changed, face blurred. He told the story from start to finish. How he was asked for $5,000. How he refused. How he worked with authorities to get proof. And why he chose to speak up. It wasn't about revenge, he said. It was about fairness. Because if good people stay quiet, bad things keep happening. The video went viral. Comments poured in. Some people thanked him, said he was brave. Others questioned his motives, said he should have handled it differently, that he put himself and others at risk. But one comment stood out above all the rest. "Thanks for reminding me that regular people can still make a difference." That's what Daniel held on to. Because this wasn't just about one officer. It was about trust, about justice, about knowing that even when it's hard, doing the right thing still matters, and he wasn't going to stop believing that. Life didn't go back to normal right away. Even after the officer was charged and the story made its rounds online, Daniel still felt like he was walking through a world that had changed without asking him if he was ready for it. At first, everything seemed okay. He went to work, dropped his kids off at school, came home tired but proud. But underneath there was something else. A quiet pressure building inside him. Like he had stepped into a role he never asked for. Someone who stood up when others stayed quiet. And with that came questions. What now? Was this over, or had it just begun? He started getting messages from people he didn't know. Some were strangers. Others were old friends he hadn't heard from in years. Most of them said the same thing. "Thank you." One message stood out more than the rest. It was from a man who had been stopped by the same officer a few months earlier. He had been asked to pay cash for a minor traffic violation too, but he didn't have the money. So instead, he was given a ticket worth 10 times what he could afford. He lost sleep over it. He even missed work trying to figure out how to fake it. Now, after seeing the news, he wrote, "You did what I couldn't. Thank you for showing the truth." Daniel read that message twice, then again later that night, and once more the next morning. It reminded him why he did what he did. Not for praise or attention, but because staying silent only helped the person with power. Still, not everyone saw it that way. At work, things started to feel different. Not in an obvious way. Nothing dramatic. Just small changes. People who used to joke with him now kept their distance. A few coworkers avoided eye contact altogether. One day, a manager pulled him aside. "I want to make sure you're doing okay," the manager said carefully. "I've heard some concerns." Daniel frowned. "Concerns about what?" "Some people are saying that speaking out might cause trouble for the company." Daniel blinked. "Trouble how?" "They're worried it makes us look bad, like we're taking sides." Daniel couldn't believe what he was hearing. "I reported a corrupt cop. That's not taking sides. That's standing up for fairness." The manager sighed. "I know, and I agree with you. But not everyone does." That conversation stuck with Daniel long after it ended. Later that night, he talked to his wife about it. "It's not just about the officer anymore," he said. "It's about how people react when someone challenges the system." She nodded slowly. "People don't like change, especially when it shakes things up." "But shouldn't they be on my side?" he asked. She gave him a soft smile. "Not everyone wants to see the truth, even when it's right in front of them." That hit hard. Over the next few weeks, the media coverage slowed down. The headlines moved on to new stories. But Daniel knew the real impact wasn't in the news. It was in the conversations people were having offline. More officers started talking about reform. Some privately admitted that they had seen similar behavior from colleagues, but stayed quiet out of fear. Others said they supported what Daniel did and hoped it led to better training and oversight. A local community group reached out to him. They wanted to start a program to help citizens report misconduct safely. They asked if he would be willing to help design it. He agreed without hesitation. Together, they worked on creating a platform where anyone could share their experiences anonymously. They built a website, set up a hotline, and partnered with legal aid groups to offer support for people who needed it. They called it Voice for Justice. Within weeks, reports started coming in. Some were small complaints, rude officers, unfair fines. Others were serious, cases of harassment, abuse of power, and even threats. Every single one mattered. Daniel reviewed them all, sometimes late into the night. He didn't do it alone. There was a team now, volunteers who believed in the mission. But he stayed involved because he knew how important it was. Then came the biggest test yet. A high school invited him to speak at their career day. At first he thought it was a mistake. He wasn't a doctor or a lawyer or an astronaut. What could he possibly say to students? But the school insisted. "You're proof that regular people can make a difference," the principal told him. That's exactly the kind of story our students need to hear. So he stood in front of a room full of teenagers, heart pounding, hands slightly shaking. "I'm not here to tell you I'm brave," he began. "I'm here to tell you I got scared. Really scared. When I realized what was happening. But I also knew that if I walked away, nothing would change." He told them the whole story again, from the illegal parking spot to the bribe, the sting operation, the trial. He kept it honest. Didn't hide the hard parts. When he finished, a student raised her hand. "What made you decide to speak up?" Daniel took a breath. "Because silence helps the wrong people win. And I wasn't going to let that happen." Another student asked, "Do you think things will actually get better?" "That's the harder part," Daniel admitted. "Change doesn't come overnight. But every time someone speaks up, it makes it easier for the next person to do the same." After the talk, several students came up to thank him. One young man said he was thinking about becoming a police officer and wanted to know how to stay honest in a system that sometimes seemed broken. Daniel shook his hand. "Stay true to why you started. Don't let fear or pressure change your values." As he walked out into the cool evening air, he realized something. This wasn't just a moment anymore. It was a movement. More people were starting to speak up, sharing their own stories, calling out corruption where they saw it. Local leaders began talking about reforms. Even some officers reached out, saying they agreed that bad behavior shouldn't be ignored. Change wasn't instant. But it was happening, and Daniel knew he was part of it, not because he wanted to be famous or powerful, but because he believed in fairness. A few weeks later, he got a call from a national nonprofit that worked on citizen rights and legal aid. They wanted to partner with him on expanding the Voice for Justice program across the state. He agreed. Together, they launched workshops in schools and community centers. They trained volunteers. They held town halls where people could ask questions and share their concerns. Every step forward felt like progress, and every time someone thanked him, he reminded them, "This isn't about me. It's about all of us. When we stand together, we create real change." Back home, life was still messy. Bills to pay, dinner to cook, laundry to fold. But somehow, it all felt lighter now, because he had chosen to act, and that choice had rippled far beyond what he ever imagined. The months passed and life kept moving, but not without change. Daniel had become someone people recognized even if they didn't know his name. He started getting messages from students, workers, parents, all asking the same question. How do I speak up when it feels risky? He thought about that a lot, because he knew firsthand that doing the right thing wasn't always easy. Sometimes it meant losing comfort. Sometimes it meant being misunderstood. And sometimes it meant standing alone when everyone else looked away. But he also knew this: silence never helped the right side win. So he kept showing up, not just online or at events, but in everyday moments, like when he saw something unfair and chose not to walk past it. One day, while walking through a small market, he noticed a shop owner arguing with a man in uniform. It wasn't a police officer this time, just someone with authority over permits and inspections. The shopkeeper was clearly upset. "I already fixed what you asked for," he said. "Why are you still giving me trouble?" The man in uniform crossed his arms. "You know how things work," he said quietly. "A little help under the table and we can call it done." Daniel froze. It was like watching history repeat itself. Without thinking, he stepped forward. "Did you say something about paying cash?" he asked. The man turned, surprised. "This is between me and him." "No," Daniel said calmly. "If you're asking for money off the record, it's not just between you two. That's called a bribe." The shopkeeper looked nervous. "I don't want trouble," he whispered. Daniel turned to him. Trouble is already here. The only question is whether we let it stay hidden. The man in uniform gave them both a sharp look and walked off without another word. Later, Daniel sat with the shopkeeper outside his store, drinking tea as the sun dipped behind the rooftops. "You didn't have to do that," the shopkeeper said. "I know," Daniel replied, "but I've been where you were. I almost walked away once too. I didn't want to live like that anymore." The shopkeeper nodded slowly. "Thanks. Not many people would have spoken up." Daniel smiled. "Maybe not now, but maybe someday. Soon." That night, he added the incident to the list of reports on the Voice for Justice website. Anonymously, of course. Just enough detail to raise a flag and start an investigation. And that's how it began. One small act at a time. More. People started coming forward. Some shared stories from years ago, things they'd never told anyone. Others sent in tips about current issues they saw in their neighborhoods. Every message mattered. Daniel wasn't trying to be a hero. He wasn't trying to tear down the system. He was simply trying to make it better, fairer, more honest. But not everyone liked what he was doing. There were whispers, people who said he was stirring up trouble, that he was making life harder for officers who were just trying to do their jobs. Even some of his friends grew quiet. At a family gathering, his cousin pulled him aside. "I get why you did what you did," he said. "But sometimes I wonder if it's worth the stress." Daniel looked at him carefully. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you used to be just my cousin. Now you're that guy. The one who took down a cop. People don't know what to think." Daniel sighed. "I'm still the same person, I just decided not to stay quiet." His cousin shook his head. "Yeah, but not everyone likes loud voices." That stuck with Daniel for days. He wasn't trying to be loud. He was trying to be clear. Still, the pressure built. At work, things felt different. He wasn't fired, nothing like that. But he noticed fewer opportunities came his way. Promotions went to others. His ideas weren't heard the same way. It hurt, but he didn't stop speaking up. He talked to his wife about it one night after the kids were asleep. "I feel like I'm being punished for doing the right thing," he admitted. She reached for his hand. "Then maybe the world needs more people like you." He laughed softly. "That's sweet, but it doesn't pay the bills." "No," she said, "but it keeps your heart clean." That meant more than he could say. Around that time, a reporter reached out again. This time, not for a story about the officer, that chapter was closing, but for something bigger. They wanted to do a feature on Daniel's journey since the incident. He hesitated. "I don't want attention," he said. The reporter understood. "We don't have to use your real name. We can blur your face, just tell your story, honestly, simply. Maybe it helps someone else find the courage to speak up." Daniel thought about it for days. Finally, he agreed. The interview was short. Just 20 minutes. They recorded it in a small studio downtown. No flashy lights, no big stage. Just him sitting across from the reporter talking like two people having coffee. When the piece aired, it wasn't dramatic. There were no headlines screaming his name. But something happened anyway. People watched, shared, commented. Some said they finally understood why someone would come forward. Others said they had seen similar things and now felt ready to say something. One message stood out. "I saw myself in your story. Thank you for giving me hope." Daniel read that twice, then saved it. Because that's what this was about. Not fame, not revenge, not proving a point. It was about helping others feel brave enough to do what's right even when it's hard. And slowly, that's exactly what was happening. More people joined the Voice for Justice team. Volunteers trained to help review reports. Lawyers offered free advice to those who needed it. Teachers started using the story in classrooms to talk about ethics and fairness. Change wasn't fast, but it was real. And Daniel knew deep down that he had made the right choice. Even if it cost him something. Even if not everyone understood. Even if he had to keep going alone sometimes. because he believed in something bigger than himself. He believed that regular people could still make a difference, and he was living proof. The headlines faded. The videos stopped trending. Life moved forward like it always does, now fast, messy, and full of small moments that rarely make the news. But for Daniel, everything had changed. He wasn't the same man who once parked illegally just to grab coffee for his team. He still drank coffee every morning, still dropped his kids off at school, still showed up to work on time. But inside, he carried something new. Not fear or anger, but purpose. He knew now that doing the right thing didn't always feel heroic. Sometimes it felt lonely, sometimes it felt risky, and sometimes it cost more than you expected. But he also knew it was worth it, because silence helps bad things grow, and he had chosen to break that silence. One afternoon, while walking through the park near his home, he saw a group of students setting up a booth. They were handing out flyers about speaking up when you see injustice. There was a sign that read, "Your voice matters." Daniel smiled. He walked over and asked what they were doing. A young girl, maybe 15, looked up and answered, "We're part of a school project on ethics and community trust. We want people to know that reporting unfair treatment isn't betrayal, it's bravery." That hit him harder than he expected. He nodded slowly. "You're right." They talked for a few minutes. He didn't tell them who he was, just listened. Asked questions, encouraged them. As he walked away, he thought, this is what change looks like, not in big speeches or dramatic moments, but in quiet actions. In everyday choices. In the way one person inspires another and another until the ripple becomes a wave. Back home, his daughter came running up to him. "Dad," she said, "my teacher talked about someone who stood up against a corrupt cop. She said it shows how regular people can do brave things." Daniel looked at her surprised. "She didn't say your name," she added quickly. "But I knew it was you." He laughed softly. "Yeah, it was me." She hugged him. "I'm proud of you." Later that night, he sat outside with his wife, watching the stars come out. "I used to think making a difference meant doing something huge," he said, "like changing laws or getting someone fired." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "And now?" "Now, I think it's smaller than that. It's showing people that they have power too, that their voice matters, that they don't have to accept unfairness just because it's easier." She squeezed his hand. "You've done that." He nodded. "I hope so." The next day, he got an email from the Voice for Justice team. There had been progress. A city official had reached out after seeing some of the reports. He wanted to meet with the team to talk about improving oversight and local enforcement. Another officer had been suspended after a similar case came to light, one that started with a report from the hotline Daniel helped set up. And a high school had invited them back for another career day event, this time asking if Daniel could speak again. He replied with a simple, "Yes." That evening, he met with a few members of the team at a small cafe downtown. They were volunteers, teachers, students, workers, and even a few former officers who believed in accountability. They talked about what they'd built together, how many people had shared their stories, how many had found support. "We're making a difference," one of the volunteers said. Daniel smiled. "Yeah, we are." It wasn't perfect. Not every case led to justice. Not every person who spoke up was protected, but they were moving in the right direction. And that was enough. A few weeks later, Daniel stood in front of another crowd of students. This time, he didn't feel nervous. He told them the same story. Parking illegally, being asked for $5,000, choosing not to stay silent. Then he looked around the room and asked, "How many of you have seen something wrong and wondered if speaking up was worth it?" Several hands went up. He nodded. "I used to feel that way too. But here's what I learned. It's not about being fearless. It's about caring enough to act, even when you're scared." One student raised her hand. "What if people don't believe you?" "Then keep going," Daniel said. "Truth finds its way out eventually, and every time someone speaks up, it makes it easier for the next person." After the talk, a few students stayed behind. One of them asked, "Do you ever wish you hadn't done it?" Daniel thought for a moment. "No," he said, "because even if it cost me something, it gave me something more important. Peace." He didn't mean peace like everything was easy. He meant peace like knowing he did what was right. Like he could look at himself in the mirror and say, "I didn't walk away." That night, as he drove home, the city lights blurred past the window. His phone buzzed, a message from the nonprofit partner. "We're expanding the program to 3 more cities. Thank you for starting this with us." He smiled, put the phone down, and kept driving. Life was still messy, still full of bills, deadlines, and long days. But somehow it all felt lighter now, because he had chosen to act, and that choice had rippled far beyond what he ever imagined.